video
Okay.
and it's on. Everyone else is on mute
Oh,
and they haven't started.
oh, okay, so sit tight.
Good evening, ladies, and welcome. Dinie will be on shortly to begin.
Hello. Hi. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Just scrolling through. Hi. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank God it all worked out. I hope all is well with everyone.
Dinie, we can't hear you.
Okay. Hi. How are you? Sorry about that. Sorry about the technical difficulties. but it's all worked out. So thanks for your patience. It's so good to see you all. I'm scrolling through. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you. Hi. Hello. Hi. Okay. Don't be shy. You can put your video screen on. It's being recorded, but it's not streaming on Facebook. So I'd love to see your faces, but if you can't, I totally get it. Totally get it. Hey, Deborah. Good. So as we together before every holiday and learn about the holiday and try to connect to the holiday and kind of glean from the holiday lessons for that particular holiday, but more than just that particular holiday, but for this particular year. So every year we're in a different place, and every year we glean from the holiday different lessons. So every year on Purim, before Purim, we kind of look at the story and we learn from different angles. So in the past, we've delved into Esther and really focused on Esther and or the historical background of the story. But this year and tonight, I would like to delve into the actual story in totality, but specifically focusing on the Megillah. On Purim, we have 4 mitzvot in no particular order, I don't think. The first mitzvah is shalach manot, to give at least one basket of food to one person, I think, but it has to have 2 people with 2 different blessings. So when you give somebody shalach manot, make sure that the basket or the bag or whatever it is has 2 different blessings in the basket. So that's shalach manot. Matanot levyonim is to give charity to the poor. A festive meal, of course, on Purim day. And to listen to the Megillah, either to read it or to hear it 2 times on Purim. Once on this year is Wednesday night, which Wednesday is Tanis Esther, the fast of Esther. Then, so we fast during the day, then we go to synagogue and we hear the Megillah and we break our fast after we hear the Megillah. So that's the first time we hear the Megillah. That's Wednesday night, Tanis Esther at night. And then another time on Purim day. So let's focus on this part of the mitzvah, which is listening or reading the Megillah. Now, there are 10 chapters in the Megillah, and every single word must be heard. So much so that if there's a disruption, or you have to go out for a moment, or you came 3 minutes late, if you did not hear every single word, then you have to hear it all over again. So like at the synagogue, after the party, the rabbi will read the Megillah again for those who came late or had to leave for one reason or another, because it's a mitzvah to hear every single word. Now there's a fascinating, truly fascinating Talmudic debate regarding how much of the story we must read or hear on Purim in order to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah. So the Mishnah asks, to fulfill one's obligation to hear the Megillah, from which point in the story must we listen to? There's 10 chapters, right? Now, there's 4 rabbis who are having this discussion. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon. They're debating this question. How much of the Megillah must be read on Purim? Now, 3 of them say from where the Jewish angle begins. So Rabbi Yehuda says from chapter 2, the part of the story when Mordechai is introduced. And Rabbi Yossi says from chapter 3, where Haman is elevated to be viceroy or minister of the king. Rabbi Shimon says one must hear it starting from chapter 6, where the king has that sleepless night and decides to reward Mordechai. Now, one note is that I'm just assuming that everyone knows the basic story of the Purim story, okay? So Rabbi Shimon says that starting from chapter 6 is okay because that's where King Achashverosh has that sleepless night. He asks his aide to please read him his chronicles. He realizes that he didn't reward Mordechai for saving his life. And that's where we should start. That's where, if you hear it from chapter 6, it's okay. So we have chapter 2, we have chapter 3, and we have chapter 6. Finally, the Mishnah records the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says one is obligated to hear the entire Megillah. In Rabbi Meir's view, there are no shortcuts. One must hear the entire story from the very beginning, from chapter 1, including the sordid details of Achashverosh's wild parties and beauty pageants and all. And the Talmud proclaims that the halacha, who do we listen to? Who do we follow? The halacha follows Rabbi Meir. In other words, the Talmud says, don't think that any part of this story is superfluous or unimportant. Every word is crucial to the plot. And until this very day, we follow Rabbi Meir's opinion, who says that we must read or listen to the entire book of Esther in order to fulfill our obligation of hearing the Megillah on Purim 2 times. But this view and verdict seems strange if you actually look at the story inside. Why would there be a religious obligation to listen to the story of a Persian king's feast celebrating his 3rd reign? And I'm just going to open the Megillah here just to give you an example of chapter 1. So it starts that it's in his third year of reign, and he invites all the noblemen and the princes for a 180-day feast. And when these days were fulfilled, the 180 days, the king made a second party. And to this party, everyone was invited. That was for 7 days. A week-long feast for all the people who were present in Shushan, the capital, great and small alike, in the court of the garden. Okay, so here I'm just reading straight from the Megillah. There were hangings of white fine cotton and blue wool, held with cords of fine linen and purple wool, upon silver rods and marble pillars. The couches of gold and silver were on a pavement of green and white, and shell and onyx marble. The drinks were served in golden goblets, no 2 goblets alike, and royal wine in abundance according to the bounty of the king. And the drinking was according to the law without coercion. And it goes on describing the menu, describing the drinks, describing the tapestries. And then it goes on of how the queen was executed, Vashti is executed. And then in chapter 2, the story gets even wilder. Now Vashti is gone and the king needs a new queen. So he launches this nationwide beauty contest. Okay, now, just to remind you that it's an obligation to hear every single word of this, so much so that we actually make a blessing, a shehecheyanu in the beginning, like we started, we ended with this is like a mitzvah. This is an obligation to listen to every single detail. And if you read definitely chapter 1, it kind of makes you wonder what's going on. So in chapter 2, like I said, he launches this beauty contest and all of the empire, and there's recruiting agents that are dispatched all over his 127 provinces to find eligible women and bring them back to the capital for this year-long preparation, after which they would be presented to the king. And finally, the winner was announced. A Jewish maiden, Esther, was the new queen. Now, having heard this story and listened to the Megillah so many times, like I said, we take it for granted that the Megillah begins with these events. Like, oh yeah, that's the story. But if you think about it, it's difficult to understand. Like, I understand now the question in the Talmud between the rabbis, where actually should the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah begin? Is it necessary for us to gather men, women, and children to listen to all the sordid details of a crazy King Ahasuerus's wild escapades? Is there no way to just tell us the basic story that Haman tried to kill us, and through Esther, God saved us without subjecting us to these details? We probably wouldn't want, even our children exposed to this. It talks about how Esther, when Ahasuerus called Vashti, he called her. Why was she so upset? He wanted her to appear naked, only in a crown. And there's some details there, about what was happening with all the maidens for the year. It's not the kind of story that you would think, would be made a blessing over. Now, it is true that if Vashti would have not been killed, Esther would not have become queen and not be able to save her people. Yet, this is only the prerequisite of the story. We don't really need the story of Vashti at all. Esther, a king is looking for a new wife. Doesn't matter what, why do we have to include all chapter 1 and chapter 2? So the Megillah is the only book in Tanakh, which is the 24 books of, the oral Torah and the written Torah, from which we're requested, like I said, to read every word. And it actually says it in the Code of Jewish Law. So in every synagogue throughout the world, congregations are completely silent. You don't have children running around. Thank God in our synagogue, we have the children inside with an interactive video to keep them engaged, to keep them quiet, because for education reasons, we want them in. But in most synagogues, there are no kids there, because if one kid makes a little shout and one word is not heard, then the person who didn't hear that word did not fulfill the mitzvah of the Megillah. So just to bring that out, that it's very important to hear each word. So why do we have to hear every word? These events are not exactly describing the holiest and purest events in Jewish history. It's not like, this doesn't even refer to when we go to synagogue to hear the 10 commandments. When we hear the 10 commandments, it doesn't say you have to hear every word. You go to synagogue, you hear the 10 commandments. If there's a little cry from a baby, it's okay. You were there, your soul was there, you heard the 10 commandments. Or hearing the weekly Torah portion in shul, right? You're there, you heard it. There's no commandment to hear every word. With the Megillah, it's the only scroll, it's the only reading, it's the only historical reading that from the Torah that we have to hear every word. Yet here with Ahasuerus's crude behavior, we have to listen to every word. Why is it so important? So this class is based on a talk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And 38 years ago at a Purim Farbrengen in 1984, the Rebbe offered the explanation, this brilliant explanation. It's not just like, oh, that's a nice explanation. It's a brilliant explanation, but even more so, it's a foundational worldview that we should take to heart to guide our life experience. Now, the Rebbe says that chapter 1 is not an introduction to the story. It doesn't consist only of the facts that led to the actual Purim story, which is Esther becomes queen, Haman becomes minister, he plots the destruction, and she saves the day. Rather, that part, chapter 1, okay, is part of the actual story. The story the Megillah is trying to convey is at an insane, ridiculous feast that a Persian leader held for 187 days is really all orchestrated by the master of the universe to lead to the delivery of his people. And the Rebbe explains the Megillah teaches us that even that which is not seemingly part of the real story is really all part of the story. A king throws a feast for 187 days. How is that connected to the ultimate purpose of creation? How does that contain meaning? How can we learn anything from that? How is that in any way related to God's plan for his world? But in reality, a decade later, after the story begins, we discover that the events of the feast, of that feast, are what led to the salvation and rescue of the entire Jewish nation. All of the details of history, even those which appear as being isolated, self-contained events, are, from God's perspective and in the understanding of Judaism, part of the ultimate story. So let's flesh this out a little bit. Now, on Purim, we wear masks, we get dressed up, right? On Purim, we discover that nothing is as it seems. We get dressed up, we disguise ourselves into completely different people. We morph into anyone we want to be. Looking back at the costumes that like I've personally worn, I'm like, whoa, 1 year is Mona Lisa and another year a flight attendant or another, Marilyn Monroe. You just get dressed up and all of a sudden you become someone else, right? And we disguise ourselves as somebody completely different. Why do we disguise ourselves on Purim? What's the reason? Because on Purim, nothing is as it seems. Was the banishment of Vashti simply one of those things that happen when a crazed Persian emperor gets drunk? Was it just a coincidence that Mordechai happened to overhear a plot to kill the king? Did Ahasuerus choose Esther to be his queen because she happened to be the most beautiful woman in the empire? Was it plain bad luck for Haman that he happened to come visit? I'm sorry, I'm teaching from my phone, I'm sorry. Was it plain bad luck for Haman that he happened to come to visit Ahasuerus just when the king was having Mordechai's heroic deed read to him, when he happened not to be able to sleep? Was it Esther's charm and Ahasuerus' idiocy and flippancy that made the king suddenly hang his favorite minister? We have to ask ourselves these questions. Purim was instituted because the Jewish people at the time understood that it was God himself who did all of the above to save his people. He was just disguising himself as a Persian palace soap opera. When Hashem took the Jews out of Egypt, on Pesach, it says that the entire neighborhood, everyone, all the nations saw the miracles performed by Hashem. Everyone recognized it. All the enemies recognized that this was a miracle. It was obvious. And when on Hanukkah, when a small jug of oil burned for 8 days, right? The most skeptical Hellenist saw that it was an act of God. It was clearly an act of God. But on Purim, it was different. Purim, the story spanned for 9 years, So Purim means lots. Pur is a lot. Purim is plural, lots. Purim, on the other hand, is unique in that the most miraculous of salvations was shrouded in the garments of nature, luck, and coincidence. God was hidden and he remained hidden throughout the entire story. The Megillah is the only book that God's name does not appear even once. From all 24 books in the Torah, Hashem's name does not appear once. Everything is hidden. Hashem is hidden. Purim is a masquerade. Esther, Hester. Hester means to hide. The scroll is scrolled up. Look at our hamantashen. Even our poppy seeds are in the cookie and we close it up. Yeah, it peeks out, but it's inside. It's hidden. That's why the filling is supposed to be hidden. I don't know if this is a Ashkenazi or a Hasidic custom to eat kreplach. I don't know if you know about kreplach, but some people know about kreplach, I think. We'll talk about it after the class. If anyone curious to know if anyone does eat kreplach on Purim. But kreplach is it's dough made out of wheat.
It's like ravioli.
Yeah, like a
It has
ravioli.
meat.
Exactly. And then some people put meat inside or chicken, usually like with onions and carrots, or with meat, onions and carrots. You put it inside and you close it up. So it's hidden. Okay. So all is hidden. God is hidden. We're hidden in costumes. Even our food is hidden. So what sets Purim apart? What is going on here? Now, like I said, the Megillah spans a 9-year period. And it's actually compressed into one book, 10 chapters, and it takes about 30 minutes to read. But the story took place over the span of 9 years. And we can see with perspective and hindsight that every detail was working towards a purposeful end. When you're reading it in 30 minutes and you're cognizant of it, you say, oh, wow, it's 30 minutes, it's compressed, it's condensed. And the story of the Megillah is that everything is part of the Megillah story. So it's all part of the Megillah story. It's 30 minutes. And you can, when you read it, you could see, okay, yeah, I can see how this story flowed. But imagine that this story actually happened over 9 years, okay? So looking at ourselves for a moment and our lives, it's difficult to see that everything that happens is part of a large puzzle, because our lives as well aren't compressed into a 30-minute reading. Our lives are fragmented in so many ways. We're often torn between diverse responsibilities and inclinations. We have so many conflicts and lots of confusion to deal with. It's difficult to be cognizant that it's all part of a master plan, part of the puzzle when we're going through challenges or dealing with things. It's really, really difficult because we're kind of zoomed into that challenge or whatever we're trying to deal with. And it's hard to realize that whatever we're dealing with or whatever we're going through is part of the puzzle, the larger puzzle. It's a puzzle piece. Life is a puzzle. It's difficult to see that life is built from a sequence of small moments, each of which is essential for the entire puzzle of our lives. Life is not comprised of only highs, the special moving moments we cherish forever and wish would never end. It's comprised of countless moments that make up daily life. Even the moments that we don't particularly enjoy. When we're in those moments, we want them to be done with and over, and we want to get on with our lives without realizing that those are components of our lives, of our stories. They're the piece of our puzzle. But the truth is that each of these moments is necessary, and without them, we can never really get to the next part of our story. So often we find ourselves stuck. We ask, like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I stuck in traffic all day? Why am I stuck dealing with this difficult person? Or why did I have to get a flat tire? Or worse, God forbid, why am I in this stressful situation that keeps refusing to allow me a moment's rest? when we feel this way, we respond in different ways. We sigh and we grumble, and basically we wait for it to be over and for better times to come, for our real lives to begin or to continue. And the story of Esther, the Megillah's Esther tells us at those very moments, the moments that we don't want to deal with, when we are shrugging our shoulders because things seem boring or unimportant or just sometimes annoying, God is writing history. He's writing our story. He's weaving together the many tiny pieces of our puzzle that produce the story of our lives. And this is precisely how the Purim miracle came to be. As the Megillah tells us, Achashverosh held his feast in the 3rd year of his reign. Now, it was in his 7th year, 4 years later, that Esther was chosen to be the new queen. And it wasn't until the 12th year of the king's rule, 5 years after Esther became queen, that Haman's wicked decree was issued. And that's when it became clear that the ball for this miracle had begun rolling 9 years earlier with Achashverosh's feast, an event seemingly unrelated to Haman's decree or to our salvation. But already then, God was putting the puzzle pieces into place so that Esther would be in the right place at the right time to be able to influence the king at that critical moment to avert the destruction of the Jewish people, God forbid. So Purim teaches us it is all part of one cohesive story. If you introduce God into your life, if you view life from his vantage point, that even a Persian party is part of the story of God helping the Jews transform the world through Torah and mitzvot. Every part of the story is for the ultimate goal. So that our lives, that your life is a complete tapestry, it's a complete puzzle. It's not random pieces that life is puzzling only when you forget every moment is a puzzle piece. Again, that life is puzzling only when you forget that every moment is a puzzle piece. When you realize that every moment is a puzzle piece, life isn't puzzling. And there's a concept in science that helps explain why chapter 1 is so important and basically backs the point we're talking about. You know, surprisingly, it's called chaos theory, and you can Google it. I Googled it. It doesn't demonstrate that things are random and meaningless. It actually suggests that all matters of seeming wild randomness display surprisingly complex and beautiful order. I Googled it. So it basically says that things that seem random are surprisingly part of something that's complex and a beautiful order. It's called chaos theory. One of the proponents of this theory was actually Joseph Ford, and he refuted Einstein's statement. When Einstein said God doesn't play dice with the universe, Ford said, yes, God does play dice, but the dice are loaded. So when we gaze at this infinite universe, and we realize that our planet is just a speck of dust, and our actions seem valueless. We seem so small. You know, you lay on the beach, you look up at the sky, you see this vast sky, and you feel so small and so minute. And we feel a little valueless sometimes. And how can an intelligent person believe that all the universe was created for our service of God? It's vast, it's massive. How can one truly embrace that my life and my actions and my good deeds and my mitzvot makes a difference? And this is what Purim teaches us. The entire grandiose story of the universe is all part of a single story. God yearning that his children, the Jewish people, and all of humanity serve him and become ambassadors of love, light, and making this world a home for Hashem to dwell, a place of peace where he feels comfortable to dwell. When we bring peace into our world, we make it easy and comfortable for God to dwell among us. When we're not united, when there's no peace, when there's strife, it's harder for God, who is all good, to dwell within us down here in this world. And that's our mission. That is our mission, to be ambassadors of love and light, making this world a sanctuary for God. Now, 187-day party was really part of a single story of saving the Jews. And so it is with every large and small story of our world and our history. And if you look at the last few years, and if you even look back to 9/11, and you look at, these are big parts of our stories. These are big parts of histories. We can for sure look at it and say, wow. We just had David Friedman speak in the shul, the Abraham Accords. That's very clear. Like, for us to see every stories to the smallest stories, from the biggest things that happen in our lives to the smallest things that happen in our lives, that they are a piece of the puzzle. They are the piece of our tapestry. The Megillah teaches us to view these world events. The story of Purim is not that God saves the Jews from annihilation. It is much deeper than that. Much deeper than that. It's that God is part of every part of our lives, big or small. And the Megillah teaches us about the role of a Jew in this vast universe. The entire universe, the entire vast cosmos is here for us to transform it into an abode for the divine. How? Through Torah, mitzvot, goodness, and kindness. That's it. That's what it is. This is the essence of the story of Purim, transformation. Think of the incredible events of the story. So who was the one who suggested to kill Vashti, which caused Esther to be chosen? It was Haman. He himself is the one who ultimately allowed Esther to enter the palace and do away with him. Who was the one who decided which day the Jews would attack their enemies in a self-defense and destroy their killers? Originally, Haman cast a lot, and he was going to kill the Jews on the 13th of Adar. It all turned around, of course, but he was the one, again, Haman, he was the one that chose the day that originally he was going to destroy the Jews, but it turned around, and he was the one who chose the day that the Jews were going to destroy their enemies. Now, who is the one who prepared the tree upon which Haman was hung? None other than Haman himself. He made the tree to hang Mordechai on it, and that tree became his final resting place. So who decided that Mordechai would be dressed in the royal garments, drive on the king's horse, led through Shushan with great fanfare and honor? Again, it was Haman. He was the one who suggested to the king to do this, thinking it would be for him. So it was basically Haman who arranged for the destruction of our people. And it was the same Haman who, in his very plotting to destroy us, created the catalyst for our salvation. So why all these ironic twists? These twists is the very message of Purim. It's these exact twists that are the message of Purim. Even that which is not part of the story is really part of the story. Even that which seems opposite to the story is really part of the story. It's all part of the story, even if we can't recognize it at the time. Now, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I heard this very interesting, fascinating story. And it was like, wow, if we open our eyes and we look at everything throughout history, for us as Jews, for the world, and us personally, you could really see the pieces of the puzzle coming together. So this story took place in 1839. It was the first Opium War, and it took place between China and Britain. Finally, it was basically a conflict about foreign trade in China, okay? So finally, in 1842, the Treaty of Nanjing was signed, which essentially turned Shanghai, China into an international city, open freely for trade for people of all countries. So if you're living in 1842 and you were Jewish, if you're reading a newspaper, you would not see the story, anything essential to the story of the Jewish people and our mission in the universe. Like, oh, wow, nice. You know, they were at odds, China and Britain. Took a few years, and now they have this treaty, and now there's open trade in China. Very nice. It's just another bloody and tragic conflict in the East that ended with a treaty. But fast forward 100 years, from 1842 to 1942, what happened? We all discovered that this part of the tapestry of events was saved generations of Jews. There was only one city in the world where Jews fleeing Hitler could enter and stay without a visa. Because of the treaty 100 years before, people could enter without a visa. Shanghai, China. They were refused entry, Jews were refused entry into every other country, including the United States, Britain, and what was Palestine, even Israel. As a result of this treaty, 60,000 Jews were saved from the gas chambers by fleeing to Japan. And from Japan, they went to China, where they remained during the Holocaust. And hundreds of thousands of Jews are alive today because in 1839, a war between Britain and China, ultimately in 1842, opened the gates of Shanghai to refugees. And it was so open that people didn't need visas to get in. And this is the uniqueness of the redemption and story of Purim. It wasn't one mind-numbing, eye-popping miracle like the splitting of the sea or the giving of the 10 Commandments, you know, with all the fanfare on Har Sinai. It was a miracle made of discretion. Behind the scenes, when nobody was looking, God put all the puzzle pieces in the right place, from the first party for the ministers for 180 days, and then the second party for 7 days for everyone else. From this drunken fool, Ahasuerus, to the beauty contest, a divine plan was brought to fruition, and Esther became the queen of Persia. And she was there to defend her people when the time came. And it wasn't right away. It wasn't 30 minutes. It was over a span of 9 years. Now, the message that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is trying to impart here derives from the Purim story. It's an enormous message. There is no moment in life that just is. There's no moment that isn't relevant to the big picture. Our Torah involves every aspect of our life. Torah teaches us how to dress. In the Code of Jewish Law, you can read how to dress, how to eat, how to sleep. The reason is because every moment matters, and eating is part of our divine mission, and sleeping is part of our mission as well. Even walking down the road is part of that mission. Therefore, we must live every moment correctly and inject it with meaning, and realize and be cognizant, even though it's very difficult, be cognizant of the fact that everything that happens is part of the master plan. And it's especially important when it comes to educating our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. Some will say, okay, you know, the child's still young, we can let him be for now. And when he gets older, we'll train him to behave like a mensch. But the Megillah tells us that the future takes place in the past. The future takes place in the past. Life is a tapestry, and it's woven of a series of events over time. beginning from the moment of birth. Every moment thereafter takes its place in the story of the future. So because every moment of the past takes place, it forms the future. Jewish education also must begin from the moment of birth, and in a certain sense, even before. It's not like, oh, when he becomes bar mitzvah, that's when. No, as soon as she's little, try to educate them as soon as possible. So when we recognize the enormity of every moment and take every moment seriously, we can begin to see how everything is part of a divine plan. And that is where the redemption is made. That is where the redemption of Purim is transformed into the personal redemption of every one of us. Like, they say the devil's in the details. It's in those details that we can be transformed, have a personal transformation, a personal redemption for every one of us. And please God, a global, God only knows we need it, a global redemption of the entire world with the coming of Mashiach. That's the ultimate plan of the coming of Mashiach. But we must learn from Purim and reading every word of the Megillah that the world has a director, and he put us here for a purpose. And every event in the world leads to that purpose. If you recognize it or not, it is the case. And we must never forget that we are the central players in the drama of history, that your mitzvah can tip the scale. You have the power to influence and impact the entire world. It's really a hard thing to swallow, because you think, well, what can I do? But every single person has the power to impact the entire world. So before Purim, let's take these lessons to heart, and let's use our power and make a difference, all the while being aware that life is puzzling only when we forget that every moment is a puzzle piece. And I'd like to wish everyone a miraculous week, a miraculous Purim, a miraculous year, and that we should be able to see that every part of our lives is a piece of the puzzle, and that we should be able to go through, God forbid, shouldn't have challenges, but we go through those little kinks with realizing that it's just part of the master plan. If anyone has any questions, I can take it now, but I wasn't sure how the timing would be. I read a story about Steve Jobs, his commencement speech, and it was really, a lot of it was like all about this point. But before I read it, I just want to see if anyone has any questions. You can unmute yourself. Any questions or anything to share? And if we have time, I'll read the story of Steve Jobs. Anyone? Let me check the chat to see if there's any. Let's see. To be here together. Yes, it is amazing to be here together. Nice. Stacy's eating dinner. Great. Okay. Anyone have any questions or anything to share?
Nina,
Okay.
I looked up for you for Krepla. It's an Ashkenazi.
That's what yes, Kreplach is Ashkenazi. Yeah, definitely not Sephardic. I was wondering, like Ashkenazic or like Hasidic or like a custom. But as we know, Minhag Yisrael Torahi, customs are part of the Torah. So we keep those customs like mitzvot. So thank you for that. They are
You're
quite.
welcome.
You can.
And so that you know, I'm wearing my mask, and this is from Venice, Italy, when we were there.
Who's talking?
If you do go to Venice, some of the stands do not take credit cards, and we only had so many euros left. That's why I have such a small Purim thing. The woman was nice. The woman was nice enough and took whatever euros that we had left in cash for the mask, which I thought was really nice of her. So this is from Venice, Italy.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So I read this interesting story. I think I'll share it with you because we have a few more minutes. So I'll read it to you because I was very touched from it. And I was like, this really brings out some of the points that we learned tonight. So in 2005, CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, who was 56 years old and battling the illness that took his life, delivered a commencement address at Stanford University. In it, he summed up his life. He described how at age 17, he had used up all his parents' savings to enroll at Reed College in Portland, one of the most expensive schools in the US, but soon found himself lost. He reads, he writes, he speaks. Okay, after 6 months, he related. I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was spending all the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at the time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphied. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography, typography, not typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course of college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces and proportionality spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on this calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college. It was very, very clear looking back 10 years later. The point Mr. Job continued was clear, and this is what I found so meaningful. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. And basically, as we were saying in this class, Steve Jobs is talking about dots. We're talking about puzzle pieces. But the fact is that everything that happens to us and happened to us is a piece of a puzzle. And if we realize that and we zoom out, first of all, we're able to deal with things easier because we realize it's all in the divine plan. But we can really make every moment in our lives count, even the seemingly insignificant moments. Every moment counts. The moment that you're in traffic also counts. Those annoying moments in your life also count. They're part of your story. They're part of your day, your life, your year, and your tapestry. And we learn that from the Megillah. We learn that because, like I read in chapter 1, some of the details, as you'll read Wednesday night, hopefully you'll read the English, are really seemingly just unessential. But as we learned tonight, every piece of the puzzle is essential, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that everything that happens to our life, in our lives, to us, big or small, is part of the larger, beautiful tapestry that God wishes for us. So on that note, if anyone has anything to share, I would love to hear from you. Anyone? Okay, so I want to, if you weren't here, I'd be talking to my phone for joining me and for allowing me to share teachings
I'll share.
and to allow me to be inspired from my, yeah. Who's that?
Dinie, it's been a while. Shara from Boca.
Hi, Shara. Hey, how are you? It's good to hear from you.
Good. My neighbors, Laura and David, have been coming to the shul recently.
Nice.
I'm happy about it. Oh, and Mazel Tov, you've had a few weddings and I think a few children since I've seen you.
Had moments, yes.
Amazing. So it's funny. It took me about almost 45 years, right? So I'll almost be 45 to see, thank you, everything coming together. Like while I was ahead of the ball and asking so many questions, and especially to my rabbis and Rebbetzins, because my journey was so intricate in particular. At this year in particular, it's making sense. Like I've had to rescue family members. I've had to do like over the top things that no other human could do. And really, it was just timing. So this extreme faith and the fact that I remember nearly everything and what you said about the dots, like I can see history and I can put it all together now. And then now there's just a freedom of creating the future. So one year I was in Germany during Purim in Hamburg. And I ended up going to a shul in Hamburg, which was super interesting because growing up, everyone was like, oh, Germans, you know? And I was like, oh, nobody, everyone was really nice and the shul was great. And so I got to experience Purim in Germany. So like the moral of the story is like each and every Jewish person in particular, even though this year I'm more ecumenical than ever, because with the way the world is, it's really helpful. Each Jewish person is a part of our bigger story that only comes from the past. And even though it seems like we have all this new technology and, you know, plastic surgery and you name it, vaccinations, I still think the truth, if we go back to the past, we will always have peace.
Yeah. And that's perhaps I was thinking while you were speaking, that's perhaps why as we get older, we tend not to sweat the small stuff. Like we kind of realize like it's so unimportant, you know, and, you know, as we get older, and that's good things about maturing and getting older and realizing that in the big picture, some of these things really don't matter. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shara. That was a treat to see you. It's been a while and to hear from you. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I'll be seeing you up on the island sometime soon.
Hey, Wednesday night, be there or be square if you can.
I don't know if I could pull it off. Rabbi New needs me a little bit, but I'll sprinkle myself over.
Oh, we'd
Hi,
love
Nene.
to see you. Hi.
Donna Kenner just wanted to say thank you for a fabulous, fabulous class. I invited some other people, non-members and stuff, and everyone's really enjoying it. You're just fabulous. Thank you so much and keep up the good work. See you in Purim.
You, so kind of you, really. Thank you so much. It's a treat to be able to spend a little bit of time with all of you and to learn together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about Purim, any specific questions about Purim on how to celebrate Purim, or any questions, about the story, because I know we didn't talk about the story specifically. I mean, we alluded to it many, many times, but if anyone has any questions, don't be shy. Every question's important. So, okay. Thank you very much and have a beautiful evening. And I hope to see you all on Wednesday night. And I hope not to recognize you either. Disguised. All the best. Lots of love, friends. Take care. Bye.